Welcome to the first episode of the revitalised Evolve to Succeed podcast, and we have a very special first guest, and that is Jeff Mostyn. So most of you will know Jeff Mostyn as the former AFC Bournemouth chairman. But in this conversation that I'm going to have with Jeff, we're going to find out a bit more about him as an individual, his life, and of course touch on all of those football stories. It's a conversation full of humour, humility, and emotion, and some great inspirational moments. So please do enjoy this episode. Welcome, Jeff, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Thank you.
I'm really honoured to have you as a guest on the podcast, a lifelong Bournemouth fan, so I have a lot to thank you for your involvement in the recent years and the recent successes of the football club. But I want to take this opportunity to learn a little bit more about Jeff the person, Jeff the background, his business career, as well as that I'm sure we'll come on to some of the football stories.
I'm sure we will.
And your time with the club. So if we go, right back to the start, what are the early years of your life, Jeff, like? And what aspirations did you have when you were young?
Well, I suppose, my aspirations from the age of 5, people always ask, when you were a child, what were your first thoughts? What did you want to be? It's very, very difficult for anybody to answer that because you've got absolutely no idea how your life is going to pan out. But I think the only thing I was ever good at school was football. Okay. So it's quite strange how many, many, many years later, it became my chosen career, not what I thought it was going to be, because I wanted to be a footballer. Yeah. And I suppose that was born out of my time at school was pretty difficult. So born and bred in Manchester.
Okay. Manchester lad.
A Manchester lad, an honorary Manc now. And I left school at 15 with no qualifications at all, other than a degree in truancy. And whenever I'm speaking about that, people always laugh, but I was very good at it. So I got a first.
and why was that? Why was there that kind of focus and not perhaps focusing on your schooling?
Well, I suppose that, there were many occasions when I was at school when I was bullied. A combination of my size, and there was quite a lot of anti-Semitism in Manchester, and probably nationally, but in particular, I found it quite difficult. Okay. And as you can imagine, now if you look at a curriculum and think, right, you're going to be bullied on a Tuesday at 11 o'clock, there's every chance you'd be joining me not at school.
Yeah, you do anything to avoid that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And with my passion being football, I used to go to watch Manchester United and Manchester City train, and then I'd collect autographs. And then when I did go back into school, I'd sell the autographs in order to get enough money to go to the matches, and then spent quite a lot of the time at the matches, not watching the game, but collecting programs, so that I could take those back into school to sell those so that I could go to the next match. And again, quite amazing. You just do it naturally. I never thought that people today call that sort of entrepreneurial skills. Yes. But of course, we're talking about 1955 here, when I was around about 10, 11, 12. I don't think the word entrepreneur existed, even though there were, many entrepreneurs that we know now, definitely, making their way in life. So I suppose very early on, it sort of set the scene that, I had some form of business acumen that I didn't ever understand. Yeah. And it was never realised because I really didn't have the education to understand it.
And it was only later on in life as you started to find your way, find your path, that those skills then come to the fore.
Absolutely.
And if you look back on your life now, that period of your life with the anti-Semitism, the bullying, that kind of little bit of hardship and challenge, what difference do you think those experiences have made to Jeff that I see before me today?
Well, I think that, your formative years, pretty much determine, unless you take the wrong road, which, you can quite easily do, especially in adversity. I think they are the formative years that, really fundamentally design, who you're going to be and how you're going to live your life. Because later on, another incident, also had a fundamental effect on my life. I say later on, pretty similar timing. So my sister, when she was 13, so I'm one of 4 children. Okay. So 2 older sisters and a younger brother 5 years younger. And the younger of the 2 sisters was 8 years older than me. So when she was 13, I would have been, around about 8. Yeah. She developed polio during the polio pandemic. Funny enough, like when we had COVID a few years ago, it was the only thing I ever remember about a previous pandemic, and I'm sure there were many in between, was the polio pandemic. Okay. My sister was paralysed from the waist down for the rest of her life, spent 2 years in an iron lung in Barrow-in-Furness at the time, having initially been treated in Manchester. And that had a profound effect on me, very close to my sister. She wasn't, some people always refer to siblings as mothers or fathers. Yeah. It wasn't quite at that level because, my mum and dad obviously, were still with us and around. Yeah. But we had a very, very close relationship. Yeah. And I started, I think, then to go off the rails. Okay. So I think if you add that ingredient onto the bullying, it didn't provide me with a solid foundation. Yeah, it's not that stable start to life,
but then probably has given you a hunger and a desire to succeed and live life to the full.
Well, it has, because when I say that my love of football, has defined later on in life, who I am really, because people know me. It's quite strange. I'm sort of slightly going off on a tangent here, but I realised when I stepped down as chairman of the football clubs, so we're going, full circle here. When you're chairman of a Premier League football club, you're defined and often introduced, this is the chairman of AFC Bournemouth, not this is Jeff Mostyn. Yeah. There's very few industries or businesses where you're defined by your role as opposed to who you are.
Your role and status, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, when I look back, you see the work that I do with my charities and also with the FA, and I'm sure we'll come on to that later on.
Certainly will.
Part of my role on the disability committee. So where I finished up working in football, I don't think it's any coincidence that I have a passion and a love for charity and the disability committee because of my sister. Yeah. And I had no idea, during that journey, that those 2 things would change the direction of my entire life.
It's incredible, isn't it? How these things in life just play out and probably do stay with us, don't they? So that when you as you say now, the time and the opportunity you've got now, you're giving back, but you're giving back in a way that is important to you and on the things that affected you in your early stages of life. Yeah. So, Jeff, curating at school, not really much engaged at school, ends up being a successful businessman, business owner, obviously getting involved in Bournemouth. Tell us a little bit about that business career that you've had, Jeff.
Well, the business career, early on, I suppose I've been told that I was a little bit of a, Jack the lad. Okay. So, from a very funny experience, my first job when I left school was at ICI. And of course, ICI, we're now talking about the 50s, 60s, one of Britain's blue chip companies. Yeah. And everybody, that was going into industry, even those with qualifications, thought that if you got a job at ICI, as my dad said to me, if you get a job at ICI, it's a job for life. Oh my God. I mean, if you said to somebody leaving university now, you're going to have a job for life. A job for life now might be 18 months. Yeah. you know, and then I'm going to have another career
If
change.
I said that to my 19-year-old daughter, I think she'd just like faint in shock and disbelief. Yeah. But in those days, it was the case, wasn't it? You joined a big corporate, you worked your way through, and you worked your way up.
Because there weren't the opportunities, you know, that you have now. You know, bearing in mind, this is, you know, long before opportunities in, you know, being an influencer, being social media. You know, bearing in mind, we didn't even have phones. You know, so, you know, you had to drive 30 miles to make a phone call if you didn't have one at home. So, you know, very much, you know, in the place. So my dad said to me, we'll go to ICI. Every year they have an apprentice intake. And he said, let's see what they have. So he drags me along to ICI literally drags me along.
Making sure you showed up properly.
Well, do you know, it's many a true word spoken in jest. Because, you know, I was never proud of the fact that I used to tell my parents I was going to school and I didn't. And you come back, you know, how was school today, Jeff? Oh, you know, it was fine. And those are things I regret in life. But going back to the ICI, we sort of opened the door and, you know, in my father takes me inside. He said, right, Jeffrey, and it's only my mum and dad, you know, ever call me Jeffrey. Occasionally my wife does. But I
when
know
you're in trouble.
when I'm sitting on the naughty step, you know, Jeffrey. So he said, right, you sit in the corner and I'll go. And he goes to this little cubby hole, you know, it appeared a cubby hole. A lady said, you know, can I help you? And, you know, had a conversation with my father. My father comes back and he said, right, Jeffrey, lady wants to see you. The only intake they have this year in September is for apprentice instrument artificers. So I said, oh my God, I said, what's an apprentice instrument artificer, Dad? He said, I haven't got the faintest idea, but I've told them that that's what you've always wanted to be. So my dad was actually a very good salesman as well. So off I go to the window. And the lady said, oh, Jeffrey, I understand, you know, you're applying for a role on our next apprenticeship intake as an apprentice instrument artificer. So I said, yes. So she said, we can't make any promises. You'll understand you don't have any qualifications at all. And then we had, you know, a 5-minute, 10-minute chat around my aspirations, you know, what I liked, what I did at school, why ICI. And I was probably even at that age able to think on my feet. And there's nobody better. I can assure you, thinking quickly on your feet. And that might have been a stepping stone for me. So I waffled my way around, you know, why I wanted to be an apprentice at ICI. More specifically about that than I didn't even mention instrument artificer in case I got into a lengthy conversation.
And got found out.
It was more about ICI being, this global iconic organisation, and that's why I wanted a career for life. So I think even then I had a reasonable conversation. And she said, very interesting, she said, but what may help you? We do actually have a vacancy now, starting almost immediately for a messenger boy. And isn't it interesting? I'm thinking at the time, oh my God, she's literally offering me a job as a messenger boy. And I think that probably summed up what I was capable of doing as a 15-year-old with no qualifications. I was good to be a messenger boy. It's only talking to you now I've ever actually realised that wasn't a compliment. You know, she was probably insulting me face to face.
But you saw it as an opportunity.
I saw it as an opportunity. And she actually, you know, I remember more or less verbatim saying that this will give you a great opportunity to have a head start on all the other apprentices. You all have worked for 3 months in the factory, getting to know people. We'll be getting to know you, and that will stand you in good stead when we make a final decision. So I said, I'll take it. And within a week, I was literally a satchel over my shoulder like a postman, delivering mail to all the different departments, taking orders for lunch, getting a penny or threepence tip.
Getting tips, earning the extra.
Keep the change. And I made a name for myself and ultimately was offered an apprenticeship.
Okay. Wow. But that's not where you ended up, was it? I mean, we talk about ICI being a career for life. There was a big change in direction, wasn't there?
There was. I went from, I think we've only got, maybe 45 minutes or an hour today. I could speak with you, for 2 or 3 hours. I love being in your company.
Thank you, Jeff.
But I'll skip probably the next 20 years of having this selling job. And I realized that my skill, was in retail, in selling,
Okay.
as long as I've got a mouth and a pair of hands,
Okay.
because I can't talk without
So
moving my hands.
that early kind of recognition of what your strengths were
Yes.
was a big thing that you were able to then play on, and hence why you ended up in a kind of people sales environment.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, within that environment, I had my parents moved from Manchester to Blackpool, and a lot of my friends in Blackpool were working in finance. So I decided that I would study finance, take my financial, advisor exams, and I ultimately got a job working for ICI. By this time, my wife and myself were in Chester.
Yeah.
So I got a job working at the TSB in the Wales and Border Counties Bank. The head office being Shrewsbury. They didn't even have a cheque account. It was a little red book or a blue book.
Yeah.
And we launched cheque accounts. So I helped with that. But predominantly, my job was to advise on financial products, insurance products, unit-linked products, endowments.
Okay.
I absolutely love that, and came up with one or two revolutionary ideas. After a very short space of time, I couldn't understand why we have all these people coming into branches, and I can only see 3 people at night. So I suggested to my regional manager, why don't I stay in the bank during the day and start to see more and more people? And it became the norm that the manager would give up his office the day that I was in the bank. And I literally broke every record.
Wow.
It's
that entrepreneurial spirit, isn't it?
It was.
Doing things differently.
Yes. You just sort of see an angle that was going to be beneficial to the branch manager because he had targets, beneficial to the bank because of profitability, and beneficial to the trust company because they were getting a larger slice of the market.
Yeah. And how did you find being in that? Because, even in those early years, and obviously the Jeff we know now, there's very much a spirit, this kind of sense of freedom, this individuality. Clearly you had that from a young age from everything you've said so far in our conversation. Yeah. So how did you find being in a corporate environment? Did you never feel constrained?
No, it's quite interesting. I actually felt wanted.
Okay.
It was probably, coming back to, the rebel, of my youth, where everything that I'd done was on my own back. If I didn't go to school, that was my decision. And probably, whether or not subliminally it was a non-conformist, attitude. It wasn't that. I didn't go to school because of the reasons that I've previously alluded to. But I think that what I needed to grow up.
Okay.
I needed to establish myself professionally. And I had an amazing mentor, a guy called Noel Audley, who on the training course, which was a 6-month, training course in Andover, he taught me everything I knew about psychology, about philosophy. I studied body language, and all the things that before I was just a salesman.
Yeah.
If you gave me anything to sell, I would sell it.
So before it's the gift of the gab type thing.
Well, that's exactly what it was. And of course, that was a term, often used in the East End of London or in Manchester, sort of quite a sort of a Jewish, selling, already. And I needed to, get to grips with my life. Otherwise, I could have spiraled out of control. Yeah. Because, you're only as good as the next day, when you're working by yourself. So I actually loved the environment. And I remember Noel saying to me on the course, I'd never won anything in my life. And I remember the gala dinner. And, now that's a very old-fashioned name, a gala dinner. It was at the end of the course. and he had the scrolls. And he said, right, we're having the prize giving tonight, and the first prize I'd like to award is to Jeff Mostyn. Oh my God, I'd never won anything in my life before. And, off I go. And there was, about 30 people on the course, and he opens this scroll and he said, Jeff, the award that, you've won, he said, academic nil, but 100% for entertainment value. And I said, oh my God, Noel, thank you so much. This is amazing. Once again, without realizing that I'm sort of ridiculing myself. This is a training course and I've just, scored 0. Yeah. But he took me aside afterwards. He said, you will be the most successful person that the TSB Trust Company has ever had. And he said, for one reason. He said, you were the only person with no financial background at all, no previous experience. Everybody else had experience. And he said, one of the pitfalls of experience, it allows you to judge what you want to take into your own career going forward, and what you want to dismiss because you think you know better.
Yeah. And have you got, I assume you have, this really strong competitive spirit?
I am honestly, if my wife Rosie was here today, she would tell you when even we were playing a game a couple of Christmases ago with my grandchildren, I screamed at I was on the same team as my granddaughter, and I absolutely screamed at her because of the time she was taking to answer a question. And Rosie said, sweetheart, you can't say this to Lucy. So I think my whole sort of raison d'etre in life and business is it's the winning that's important, not the taking part.
Okay.
But there's a big but there, and this is the important thing in life. When you have a conversation with anybody and they say but or however, the most important thing is what comes next. And what comes next is you have to take part in order to win.
Yeah.
But for me, being a runner-up is not success at the highest level.
Yeah.
But you have to put success into context. And I think that sums up my own philosophy of the winning is important, not the taking part.
Yeah.
But you have to take part in order to win.
Yeah, definitely. I get that now. And that brings in that human kind of element, that personality, the caring nature that so many of us have seen in you, Jeff, over the years as well. But you did leave the TSB and you did start your own business. You did co-found a business. And I think this is a little bit of your story that I didn't know until recently. And we probably all wondered as football fans, where did this Jeff Mostyn come from? Where did he make his money? How did he get the money to invest in Bournemouth? So perhaps could you just tell our listeners a little bit about the business you started and how you sort of grew that business and perhaps some of your key successes in that part of the journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, life is, full of sliding door moments. So about early 90s, I left the TSB and I went to work in Florida. And I was selling real estate in Florida. Now, my great mentor, Noel Audley, had always had a desire to work in Florida. And in fact, he had worked in Florida early on. And I became, again, reasonably successful at what I was doing in Florida. Enjoyed the experience. And I often feel I've got sort of quite an American flair where what I love about them is they love success.
Yeah.
There's no whys or maybes. You are successful. People admire it.
Yeah, they don't put you down like perhaps they can do in the UK,
especially in professional sport.
Yeah.
For example. So off I go, and I literally one day I had an opportunity to speak to Noel and say, "Would you like to come and join me?" And he showed an appetite for it. But having lulled me into a sense of false security that he was going to join me there, I get a reverse phone call from him saying, "Jeff, I've got a great opportunity for you back in the UK." He said, "Years before I met you, I met a guy called John Brown, and he did exactly what you did, but for Barclays. And he worked for the armed force. He worked within an area where there were a lot of armed forces. So Tidworth,
Okay.
Aldershot, just to name but two.
Okay.
And he formed a company, and Noel decided to join him, as the chief executive of that company. So he said that we would love you to be the sales and marketing director. So I came back and had an interview at Shillingford Bridge. So this would be sort of 1984. And John Brown said to me, look, we know you're, successful at what you're doing. What I'll do, I'll pay for your offices in Chester as a transition, and dip your feet in the market, see if you enjoy it. And if not, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I came back and loved what I was doing. And over the next 3 years, again, I was the sales and marketing director, but I self-acclaimed myself as I think everybody was more or less a minister without portfolio. I never felt that, we were being paid a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, but, I can't be critical of John. He was very successful, and it's an owner's prerogative to pay you what, he thinks you're worth.
Right. Yeah.
It's not for you to, argue against it. But I got to a stage where I'd more or less had enough. I was recruiting and training 3 people, and by the time I put them out in the market, 4 others had gone. Right. And the one thing the army, in particular, don't like is transition because of security.
Yeah.
They were one of only 3 or 4 companies that were allowed access inside the wire. So 1988, I left along with my 2 fellow directors and set up our own business in competition.
Okay.
With the blessing of the military hierarchy, which, one needed to ensure, you had that opportunity. But, I said to my 2 partners, who were quite shocked, at me deciding to, give up my role, that if it doesn't work out with the army or we don't get permission, I'll go and do something else. They were very well educated boys. They were both Oxbridge. So one was a chartered accountant, one, was a tax accountant. And we set up the business. They were the, behind the scenes, making sure everything was compliant. The products were designed in a way that was suitable to provide a service to the armed forces. And over the next 20 years, we became the most successful independent brokerage, providing financial advice to members of the armed forces. Or I could, say, one of the most successful, because there were only a few. Okay. And others were equally successful, but selling different products. Yeah. And, I was the face of the company and had the most incredible relationship. Yeah. And I just felt that one of the things I did which again, subliminally, I had no idea that I was even doing it. But, when you're selling products and providing a service, that's your job. But I went over and above, because most of the time that we were establishing ourselves, in the market, coincided with the Afghanistan war and the Iraqi war. And, unfortunately, people lost their lives in combat. And of equal importance to me, many were returned home, having lost limbs in various states of life-changing injuries. And they were repatriated to Selly Oak Hospital in Birmingham. Yeah. Later, once the new Queen Elizabeth Hospital was opened, that's where they were repatriated to. And I took it upon myself every other week to go and visit the injured soldiers, and probably one of only a handful of civilians allowed in the intensive care areas and on the wards. Right. But I just felt that the easiest thing to do when you're selling anything is to sell. Yeah. The hardest part is the after sale service. Yeah. So when somebody had to claim on a policy for if it was a loss of life, or in this case, life-changing injuries, where is the service? Well, the service was me right in front of people who were in bed with multiple loss of limbs. And I am the most emotional person God's ever put on this planet. And there's not a Tuesday that I was at Selly Oak or Queen Elizabeth Hospital that I didn't go back to my car and just break down. Yeah. Because it was life-changing for everybody.
You've seen trauma right in front of your eyes.
And I remember one story. I was in Paderborn, and one of the family officers said to me, Jeff, you just happened to be here at the weekend, and one of your clients has lost his life in Iraq, and I'm going to see his wife. Would you like to come with me? And maybe you can explain, just what the financial implications are and the benefits, of the plans that they took out together. Mm. And I went along, and I'll never forget it. Just again, another of these things that are embedded in my mind that makes you realise that you have to have pride in what you're doing. Often people say, like estate agents, are ridiculed, and people that sell insurance, maybe not so much now, but certainly then, that the fastest, you could go into a pub, and the fastest way to clear a pub, somebody at the bar says, what do you do for a living? I sell insurance. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, where's everybody gone? And I felt, no, there's more, you have to understand there's more important things than that. Yeah. You're providing a service for somebody. And I went into the home, and her sister had come over from Kent, and she said, obviously I won't name names, my sister may not be coming down. This is emotional. It's only 48 hours since she's lost her husband. And eventually she came down, and then she told this story about her husband doing a video bedtime story for the children.
You're going to get me going, yeah. Jeff, now.
Just in case he didn't come back, and he didn't.
Wow.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
And, what happened next, was unbelievable, because I literally just broke into emotion. Well, you can see even now I remember it. And the family's officer is now cuddling me. And the soldier's wife literally just burst into a smile, and she said, oh my God, Jeff, you've come here to comfort me, and you're the one that is in floods of tears. And somehow her sister said to me later on, when she showed us out, she said, oh Jeff, she said, thank God that you came, because somehow you've reassured her that financially she'll be able to look after her two children. And more importantly, you've put a smile on her face for the first time in 2 days.
Yeah. A very quick break from this week's episode, which I hope you're enjoying. If you are enjoying, please remember, do help us and help yourself to make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing and reviewing the episode. So that's it. Short interlude from me. Let's get back to the conversation. But it is also really good evidence, isn't it? And we sometimes forget this when we're growing a business, running a business, is that you do need to have pride and purpose and belief in what you're doing,
yes,
to succeed, isn't there? Because if you haven't got that pride of the purpose, then you are just selling, aren't you? You're just trying to, it all becomes about the money. And I'm very much a believer that, if you focus on just the money doesn't come. You've got to have that belief, focus, passion and belief in what you do. And then success comes, and then hopefully some monetary reward comes along the way. And I suppose that is your story, because you ultimately, 20 years in that business, did sell the business, did make that exit that many in business do strive and want and desire. And I suppose that gave you the foundations at that point, Jeff, to think about what next. And, a Manchester boy, I think is a United fan at heart.
City fan.
City, oh, I nearly got that wrong, didn't I?
You're lucky to even get me in here today, after the debacle last night.
Yeah.
I mean,
I watched that game.
How can you dominate a game so much?
Yeah.
And
especially the second half.
Not win, but all credit to Madrid, the way they set out to play. It was the old Mourinho bus.
Yeah.
But I think there were more buses parked at the Etihad last night than you can find in Bournemouth, on a normal day.
So City, not United, so I apologise for that. So
No
a City fan,
yes,
Manchester lad at heart. How does a City fan, Manchester lad, come to buy into Bournemouth Football Club?
So during my time as a Manchester City fan, My best friend over 35, probably close to 40 years now, was Kevin Bond.
Okay.
So Kevin was captain of Manchester City. His father, John, was manager of Manchester City. And I used to follow Kevin's career. So he eventually moved to play for Southampton. And we were living in a little village just outside Newbury, at the time, having started my own business in 1988. Well, I moved down in 1984, so I wasn't living in Southampton at the time. And I got a phone call one day from Kevin, 2006, saying, Jeff, the club are in financial difficulties. Of course, he was the manager, so he would have had a self-interest, in this.
Jeff, we need some help here.
Yeah. The chairman at the time was Abdul Jaffer. Abdul, has passed away recently, so my condolences to Abdul's family on his passing. He was the chairman at the time, and he was trying to put a consortium together to, in round figures, put, I think, around about 100,000 in, somewhere between 50 and 100,000 each, to pay off a winding up notice from HMRC for unpaid taxes. So I go along, and I'll never forget it. It was October 2006. Can't remember the exact date, but it was the last match we played in October as his guest. And I'd never even been to Bournemouth before. So this was my first time in Bournemouth, was going to watch AFC Bournemouth play. We're in Division 1. And it was like a Victor Kiam moment. Sort of, I walked through the door of the football club, and little did I know that later on I was going to buy it. It just had a romance about it. I don't think I'd ever seen a game in, what was the third tier of English football before, even though City, had, also been there. Abdul introduced me to his fellow directors, associate directors, and I just thought, look, I've got some money now. This is an opportunity to get into something that I've always wanted to be involved in. I joke with people now, this wasn't at the time, but when people say, why did you buy a football club? I say, well, I'd always wanted to be a footballer. So I thought, if I buy a football club, I can pick myself and suddenly appear on the pitch, as a footballer. Well, why not? So it wasn't like that at all. So I got involved with the consortium. My vice chairman at the time, Steve Sly, local businessman. And by the time I bought the club eventually, and it wasn't an easy ride, because we had the supporters trust who had the golden share, so we had to persuade them to give up that golden share, in order
trust in you guys as a
trust in
consultant.
us. And I remember, when I think now, God, I don't know why I did it. I'm the one that's going to be putting the money in here, and I'm assuming the Toulouse-Lautrec position on my knees, in front of them, begging them to give up the share. Where, why would I be doing that? I think now everybody else should have been on their knees saying, thank, the Messiah's come, thank God, somebody's going to save the football club. Anyway, it transpired that other people had far more sense than I did. And I was the one that was left. Steve was still by my side. He'd put in, and it's all relative, a lot of money in the period from, prior to me even coming in October. And I think probably the thing that showed a lack of financial acumen or responsibility, which I don't mind admitting as a financial advisor, was I was paying the wages in the period from October to March before I'd even bought the club. Why would anybody do that? But I did.
Passion and belief again, I suppose, isn't it?
Or stupidity.
Or naivety.
Well, it was gross stupidity. You would not do that in business, even if you were a butcher, let alone, a baker, with respect to butchers and bakers, let alone a financial advisor. So March the 16th, I think it was, or March 16th, 17th, we were announced as chairman and vice chairman of the football club and the new owners. But there was an awful lot that went on, before that. And I'll never forget sort of walking around the stadium with Tony Husband, BBC South, Tony saying, why would a financial advisor buy a football club that had previously been in administration, still has debts? And, with great pride, I said, because I'm a financial advisor. So, I know I can bring financial stability to this football club. Of course, the rest is history. About 8 months later, I had to put it into
administration, 2008. And that season that we all, as football fans, remember when, the famous 2008 minus 17 season started the season on minus 17 points and another threat of winding up.
Yes.
I mean, how did that feel? Because you obviously had that confidence and that faith or that naivety, whatever we're going to say, to buy the club. A belief that you could make a difference and you could turn it around. But so soon in your tenure, the club was in difficulty again.
Yeah, I think that, what we had to face, I had death threats. My wife had death threats. My children had death threats. People didn't understand. There was this, constant, backlash from, I don't even like to say supporters, because the relationship I have with supporters now, and maybe because of the journey, but I think it's people that, often you find, will post on social media. Not that it was as prolific then as it is now, under a pseudonym, so people didn't even know who it was. But I think there was always this skepticism about why somebody from Manchester would come and buy a football club that they didn't even support. And people know I didn't support Bournemouth at the time. I just loved it. At the time, I was supporting my friend. If Kevin hadn't have been there, I definitely wouldn't have been there, because I'd never have got a phone call.
It's about serendipity, isn't it?
It is. Again, it's like it is
sliding doors moments that you mentioned earlier.
The sliding door. And I always said, they said, he's only going to buy the football club to make money. Nobody that is involved in football, would ever say you're going to make money. Even in the Premier League, it's hard to make money, because everything that comes in goes straight into the dressing room. You need to have the players. There's no other business like it. You're not building up a manufacturing business or a retail business where you're buying stock. You're going to sell it. No matter how much business acumen you have, no matter what kind of expertise your management group have or your fellow board members, if the team fail and that is out of your control, you fail. So, we rode the storm, but I think my legacy to the football club, rests around that administration. I could have walked away, and we went from Land's End to John O'Groats trying to find buyers. We finally found a couple of buyers, and Rose and I, were like elated. At last, I've done my bit, for now king and country. I need to, move on. I was putting, money into a dark hole with no hope of ever getting it back. Why was I doing that? Having been successful over 25 years.
It took 20 years to earn that money, Jeff.
And now giving it away on something that, I should probably never have got involved in the first place. And I'll never forget going away to, we went away to Spain when Gerald had said, we've got these two buyers. And we were literally, we were sat in Porto Banús, in Marbella, having a glass of wine. And the clock struck 1. It was like, the mouse didn't run up the clock. We were there with a glass of wine, and the phone rang, and it was like the devil on the end of the phone, with the greatest respect to Gerald, if he's going to watch this. It was the administrator. And he said, Jeff, get yourself back to Bournemouth. The deal's fallen through. You're back in the seat. And this is where this sort of emotional, journey, starts. That Rose and I decided on the way back that I couldn't do it anymore. I was writing the wage bill was around about £100,000 a month. So that was my commitment to the club at the time. And as well, of course, I had to pay the administrator. So it more or less came out of that. There were funds coming in from, a few other places, like we sold Sam Vokes. and that produced I can't remember off the top of my head.
There's a few little windfalls along the way.
It was about
that helped.
400,000. Yeah. So I was paying in round figures £100,000 a month, to keep the club afloat, and I just sort of really thought, wow, why am I doing this? And I arrived back at home, back at the stadium, and Gerald had said, right, we're going to have the press conference this afternoon. You and Steve Sly are going to stand at the back, and I'm going to ask you for another cheque. You're going to nod if you're going to give me a cheque, and you're going to shake your head if you're not. And even he had said to me, I don't know why you're doing this, because we can't see the wood through the trees. When is it going to stop? There was no defined line, let's just do it for 2 more months and then we're out of this.
Yeah.
It could have been, it was open-ended, absolutely. So I left home that day, and that was going to be it. I stood at the back of the room, and Gerald said to me, this is the thing. If you shake your head, I will liquidate the club live on air. This was the end of the club, not administration, because we'd previously been in administration. And if you can't find a buyer, that's the end of the club.
Yeah.
So I didn't even hear the question. My mind is, all over the place. And then Gerald said, Jeff, I need an answer. And I said, could you repeat the question? I knew what the question was, because that's what I was thinking about. Yeah. And as I'm literally staring at everybody and, the press are there, I'm thinking that 120 years, whatever it was, is going to go out of the window, on my watch here. This will have a profound effect on people and their lives. And I'm thinking, this is going to be, devastating. So I said, could you repeat the question? And he repeated it, and I nodded my head. And, that famous nod is my legacy. I'm told that this, I'm not, suggesting it is. I'm suggesting what other people have said to me it is. That had it been a shake of the head, this journey, would have ended there and then. And there's no way that we would have ever been in the position that we are now with the Premier League. And when I got home, people say, what was Rose's reaction? And she said, you don't have to say a word, sweetheart. I know what you've done. And, she's
understanding why.
Oh, my God, she's just been absolutely amazing. And, we were married, we just enjoyed our 43rd wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And she's been my rock, love of my life. And, really proud of what she's achieved, as my partner.
So as a football fan, thank you for the nod, not the shake of the head.
Thank you.
And I suppose from that moment on, the club, went on this incredible journey that is so well documented. But did you ever dream, as things started to resolve themselves during that season, we got ourselves out of the Great Escape and all of that kind of thing happening, that we would ever end up in 2015 as a Premier League club?
No. I mean, I say hand on heart, even today, that if I'd have answered that question and said yes, I'd have been sectioned, because nobody in their right mind could ever have thought that a football club of our stature and our economic situation could ever get into the Premier League. I think our ambition, was certainly the Championship. Bearing in mind, we'd only ever been in the Championship once before in the club's history.
Under Harry Redknapp.
Under Harry Redknapp, exactly. And that was memorable for that great team. And, it was before my time at football, but, I love Harry to bits. That was the most incredible achievement. And if we could have got to that, it would have been amazing. So we knew that we had a battle to stay in Division 1 after the administration. And that was always going to be, a real battle. And the last day of the season, as irony would have it, we're playing Carlisle away, but it was the day of my daughter's wedding. And I'll never forget this. Radio Solent had a phone in during the week saying, would the chairman go to his daughter's wedding or go to Carlisle? And of course, anybody that knows me, would know I'm only going to be in one place, and that was Carlisle. No, I'm only joking. It was at my daughter's wedding. But what they did is they delivered me a single frequency earpiece so I could take the game from Carlisle. And as fate would have it, and as I'm sitting in this chair, I'm just about to walk my daughter down the aisle. What we needed to do, if we won, we would have survived. A draw would have normally sufficed because the bottom club were playing the top club away. And I get the score. We've drawn 1-1, but the bottom club have beaten the top club and we were relegated. So my emotion again, I'm literally now in floods of tears, and most people at the wedding thought it was because I'm giving my daughter away. I've been trying to give her away for 5 years, so it certainly wasn't that. It's because we were relegated. So we now start the next season minus 17 points, and of course this is where the great journey starts.
Definitely.
But I think that what I've always had pride of in my life is always taking the credit for something that has always been in my own remit, but never taking the credit for something that isn't. Yeah. And I think the journey from minus 17, to where we are now, as far as I'm concerned, is very much, a collective effort. I think people always see me as, the one, because the common denominator is, with the exception of the couple of years where Eddie Mitchell, the late Eddie Mitchell, and my condolences to Eddie and his family as well, is that, he deserved credit that, he brought Maxim Demin into the football club. And that was the pivotal moment in the transition of our economic fortunes. I can absolutely say that, without Maxim Demin, the club would never, in a million years, let alone a couple of years, have got to the Premier League. And for me to have the honour of being the chairman, which was, of course, Maxim's, remit. And I always felt that as a board, and he more or less gave, myself and Neil Blake, our chief executive, the day-to-day responsibility and delegated responsibility of running the football club. The chief executive's role is to literally run the football club. My job was to support Neil and the management team. We have the most, incredible management team at AFC Bournemouth. And it was that siege mentality that we developed from minus 17, right through to the Premier League that I think won over the day. And of course, when I say, the credit should be, with Maxim, of course, Eddie Howe, as the manager. And I felt the inner sanctum, then that, surrounding Maxim, was myself and Neil and Eddie and Jason, Nick Rothwell, one of my fellow directors.
And there's a couple of lessons in there for everybody in business and in life, I suppose, is that out of adversity can come success. And that power of working as a team and being a cohesive team. The bit I think is remarkable is that, and I suppose it applies to both of those, the first being that piece around adversity. A lot of people in life, in business, in sport can bounce back, but how do you sustain that spirit? Because it was a spirit, wasn't it? It was we're in this together.
Yes.
And then same applies to a team. You can get a team of people, you, Eddie, Neil Blake, Eddie Mitchell, one, he was part of it, Maxim, and you can all have common cause, common purpose. But to remain a cohesive team over the period that you did, that is quite unusual. And I suppose I'd ask you, Jeff, why do you think you kept both the spirit and that cohesiveness for so long that I think ultimately led to the success?
Well, I think it was the spirit that created the success. And when you're on a roll, it's a lot easier to keep that spirit and that continuity than it is in adversity, as we all know. And again, I think that, Maxim's determination, through his investment, shone through everything. He was determined that we could suddenly see and have a vision of getting to the Premier League, once we were in the Championship. And you've got to understand, and everybody has to understand, what we did in the Championship was absolutely remarkable. If my memory serves me right, we were 10th in our first season in the Championship, and more or less with the same squad that we had in Division 1, with a couple of, a few additions. And in the second season, we actually won the Championship. For me, it's the most difficult league in Europe. It's easy to drop into it. It's very hard to get out of it, as these clubs will, testify. And you look at the 3 clubs that were promoted last year, there's a very good chance that the 3 will go back, or at least 2 of the 3. This year, not wishing them any, ill will.
In fact, we sustained in that first spell in the Premier League 5 years,
which was quite remarkable. But again, it comes down to, I think the continuity, that, we had times and, trials and tribulations. I don't want to, sit here today and pontificate and give the idea that every day, was a bed of roses, and that, oh my God, it was so incredible, to go to work, and then in the evening, let's have a glass of wine. My colleagues are all wonderful. It wasn't all
I can only imagine some of the
like
stories,
that, because it comes back to this frustration that you are driven by results that are out of your control. So running a business where you're out of control is very, very difficult. But I think we had that camaraderie and that respect, and we still remembered our roots, where we came from. And even the players, when we were promoted to the Premier League, you're always going to have egos in any business. It doesn't matter, from being self-employed, you would be the one that has the ego. So you don't have to be working for a business. But we managed to, I think, temper that and work together for a common goal and try to retain our position in the Premier League, which was the equivalent of Manchester City. I am obviously, I'm biased in mentioning Manchester City, but they are bloody good.
It pains me to say it, but they are.
It's the equivalent of Manchester City, having won the treble last year, just retaining your position in the Premier League. And that's worth, celebration. So it comes back to this team spirit, getting the right people in the right roles who are committed to the job. It is, what can you do for the job rather than what can the job do for you? And I think that is also very, very important.
And by the sounds of it, and from what you've said, it's also that ability as a leadership team to have that ability to be constructively challenging of each other, and to make sure that everybody is bringing their A game to the table.
So I've spoken on many occasions about the 2 dressing rooms that somehow I fantasized about, but it became a reality. I said that, we had a dressing room downstairs that was Eddie's, and we had our dressing room upstairs. But the most important thing is we had one common heartbeat that joined the 2 together. And I think that that's really important. And, if I was giving advice, as I am doing now, not specifically here today, but in my motivational talks to businesses and universities and young people, is that you have to have that mutual respect for each other, but you also have to empower people. One of the things I like to think I did at the football club was empower people to demonstrate that they have a title, but they have to have the responsibility that goes with it. Different people have different styles of management, and some people it's my way or the highway. And I've often said God didn't give me very much, but he gave me this shed full of enthusiasm and the ability, uncanny ability, to make the vast majority of people I meet in my life feel special. And the club is small enough and at one level that I could go into the media, into the accounting, into the commercial, and tell people how incredible they were. And I am very tactile, as you know.
Yeah.
And I would give people a Jeff hug.
Yeah.
And if I did nothing else that day, it might be, if Neil said, "What have you done today, mate?" If I gave everybody a hug,
Yeah.
he will have, or other people will have no idea what positive impact that has had on the business.
Yeah.
So how many people in business, how many chairmen would even know the names of their staff, let alone the players? If we're talking about a football club, how many people would tell those people every day how special they are?
Yeah. And
I can tell you how many, and you're talking to him now.
Yeah, and that made all of the difference. And it's quite interesting to see you explain that role in the success as the person that kind of joined everything together, made people feel special, and that's probably one of the reasons that spirit did obviously continue. And I suppose as we start to sort of wrap up our conversation, we got to sort of touch on how do you feel now? Because, I joked about you being a Manchester lad and a City fan, and, with that there's been that stuff. Well, why did somebody from Manchester buy Bournemouth? But I'm sure if we cut a limb off you now, your blood would be still running Bournemouth.
Oh, it's 100%. I mean, I'm a Bournemouth supporter, through and through. Manchester City, are secondary because they're your boyhood club. Yeah. Everybody's got another team, and it's strange that people ask the chairman that rather than a player. Yeah. All of our players have supporters.
Have a childhood team.
We've got half a dozen Evertonians. Yeah. Even on the management team. Yeah. For whatever reason. The reason is that something in their life sparked a love for that football club. It doesn't mean they don't support Bournemouth.
Yeah. So if we cut a limb off you, you'd be running Bournemouth blood. And obviously your journey with the club officially in a sort of senior official capacity ended last year. How have you found that transition, Jeff?
Difficult.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I never realised just, how much of the football club has always been my family, and I'm blessed with, two families, my own family and my family that is the football club, and it will always remain my family. And my passion remains with my amazing love for our supporters, and I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of our incredible supporters for the amazing love and support they have shown me throughout my journey as chairman of the football club, but also how they continue to do that when we meet up on match days. And that they will never know how much that still means to me.
Wow.
Because, when Bill bought the football club, he made it quite clear as his prerogative that he was going to be the chairman, quite rightly, of the football club. So where did that leave me? A casualty, not of my own making, but, that's life. And I felt pretty naked. It was quite interesting because one day you're chairman of a Premier League football club and you're identified. I think I said this earlier, when people introduce me, even now, this is the former chairman, of AFC Bournemouth. Well, I've also got a name. And it was only, I was invited out to Qatar during the World Cup there, and I won't name names, but a very high profile manager had said to me, Jeff, he said, I want to tell, because I was quite emotional at the time. It was very new to me, and he said to me, he said, amongst my peer group, which is not your peer group, you are one of the most respected chairmen in the Premier League, and you're loved and respected because you know when to speak, when not to speak, when you come down to the dressing rooms, you listen, and if you're asked something, but you don't, like a lot of people, come down all guns blazing, which again is the prerogative of owners, and chairman if they are the owners of the football club. But he said, let me just tell you this is the part you need to listen to. They do not love or respect you because you're chairman of AFC Bournemouth. They love you because you're Jeff Mostyn. And I phoned Rose, who wasn't with me at the time, and I said, I've just met so-and-so, so-and-so, and I feel like I've just had an exorcism, because I now realise I'm still the same person as I was yesterday.
Yeah.
And I'm still the same person to the supporters and the staff. When I go to the matches now, it's still a hug, a shake of the hand. Nothing has changed. And how important supporters are. For me, I was told, many years ago, owners come and go, chairmen come and go, directors come and go, staff come and go, players come and go. But the one common denominator that is the lifeblood of any football club are the supporters. And nobody on this planet respects AFC Bournemouth supporters more than I do. So I think I've got used to this now. Match day is still special when I'm reunited, with the staff and the supporters. And, I can only offer my total support, to Bill and all the new regime at the football club. They'll always have my, blessing and my support.
Yeah. So, but that is a great definition of true legacy, isn't it? Legacy isn't about a title. Legacy isn't about status. Legacy is about what's in your heart and ultimately how you make people feel, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah. So we are sat in, I'm going to round up with two final questions, but I just want to touch on the fact that we are sat within Lewis Manning, the wonderful hospice charity based in Poole. You've recently become a patron of Lewis Manning, so hence the sunflowers,
yes.
The sunflower you're wearing, because that is their logo. I want to understand from you why it's important. You've talked about giving back, but why is it important that you've become a patron of Lewis Manning, Jeff?
Well, it's I've been an ambassador for Lewis Manning, for some time, and I think once you see and become part of the inner sanctum, you will see the difference that Lewis Manning made to people's lives. And it's not only those people who are at end of life care, but it's about families as well. And the one thing that we know post pandemic, how difficult life is, for charities. And I think, Lewis Manning is the staff, the carers, everybody within this organisation. They are the true heroes. I've stood in front of them, at numerous events, and I've said to them, people come up to me and say, "Oh my God, Jeff, can I have an autograph? Can I have a photograph?" And I say to them that what I've done in my life pales into insignificance compared to the incredible carers and staff at this wonderful organisation.
Absolutely.
They are the real heroes in life, and the care and attention that they give to people who are at the end of their life, they are true saints. And I have so much love and admiration, for them, not just for the care that they give for those people that are under their care, but for the families of those who are equally suffering, anguish, when they know that their loved ones, may soon be departed.
Yeah. So my two quick fire questions are to end this conversation, which has been an amazing conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it, Jeff. Are, if you could go back to your 15-year-old self, what one piece of short advice would you give that boy?
Oh my God. I think given my my status at the age of 15 is, never listen to other people putting you down.
Yeah.
Always take a step forward and use any form of criticism, as an inspiration for you to be successful, and actually look back and show them what you're really worth, because everybody has an opportunity to be successful. Even if you are living in adversity, success is what you make it, and make sure that you set your standards to your own capabilities, not to what other people think you should be able to achieve.
Fantastic advice. Fantastic advice for anybody listening to. And final question, as it always is on the Evolve to Succeed podcast, what is your definition of personal success, Jeff?
I suppose my definition of personal success, these are always difficult questions because
they're wide and varied, isn't it?
Well, it is. And we alluded to the, what is success before. I suppose that, on reflection, my definition of my own personal success is that I'm now in a position to reflect on my own life, with joy and gratitude for all the people that have helped me on my way, and for me to know that I have made a contribution to other people's success. And as a consequence of that, I'm able to help others in a way that I never thought I would ever be able to. I never thought in my entire life I would be a centre of influence. And because I become a centre of influence through my journey, in particular with the football club, I'm in this privileged position to help others who are in need and support.
Brilliant, Jeff. What a great definition of personal success. Thank you so much for your time. This is what we've had a couple of conversations. We've met personally in preparation for a couple of the talks we've done in aid of Lewis Manningham today. And I'm always humbled to be in your company. I always love our conversations because of the way in which I think you show such raw emotion. You're always so honest. There's so much integrity in what you have to say. So thank you for being an incredible guest, Jeff, on the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Warren, honestly, the honour is mine, and I'm just humbled being in your company and having an opportunity to, let, everybody, understand my journey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really hope you've enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. So if you have enjoyed the episode and want to learn more about Evolve, then please do go to evolveadvisory.co.uk. There you can find out about how we do really help businesses start, grow and exit. And of course, what we'd really like you to do is to subscribe and review this podcast on whatever your favourite channel is. So that's it for now. Thank you for listening, and please join us in 2 weeks' time for the next episode of the Evolve to Succeed podcast.